Okay, hello, welcome to the Youthwork podcast. I'm joined today by Ben. I'm going to let him introduce himself a little bit in a minute. But yeah, just want to say welcome to our regular listeners and anybody new. If you haven't joined us before, we are in the middle of a series interviewing different youth workers to find out about their experiences and journeys and perhaps some cool stories and things they've learned along the way. So yeah, I'm joined today by Ben. Ben, why don't you introduce yourself and let us know what is your connection to us?
Okay, so I'm Ben Green. I'm the Youth Adviser for Blackburn Diocese, which essentially is the Church of England in Lancashire. That's probably the best way of thinking of that. There are bits of Lancashire that are covered by other dioceses, but it's probably helpful to see that. What do we say? I'm married to Ruth. I have a little girl called Hannah who's 7. I live just near Chorley. My connection to Youthwork Plus is, wow, I think you guys reached out at some point and went, hey, we're doing this thing down in sort of Milton Keynes way. Could we connect? We like what you're doing. And so, yeah, we started sort of connecting on a more regular basis, chatting a little bit about resources, how we support youth workers up here, how you guys support them down south, and just sort of a bit of a meeting of minds and sort of sharing experiences, and then have continued to connect, and obviously connecting with your sort of network for networkers, sort of nationally connecting with different youth workers and youth leaders, children's leaders, that you guys have connection with. So
yeah, cool. And we have a little random other connection, don't we? Because the church I grew up in, there's a building there that's named after your grandfather, isn't there?
Of course, yeah, I'd forgotten that connection. Yeah, so Stopsey Baptist Church. My grandfather was the Baptist minister there, as it would be, being Stopsey Baptist Church, like years and years and years ago. And the old building that used to be the church building got turned into a youth centre, and carries his name. So yeah, the greenhouse is named after Norman Green, the minister back then, who is my granddad. So yeah, very weird. I've forgotten that connection.
Yeah,
I've forgotten the Luton connection. There you go. Yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
can't escape the family connections. That's what happened.
No. Yeah, that's a good one. How and when and why, Ben, did you get into youth and kids work?
Ooh. I grew up. My dad was a Diocesan Youth Adviser, it turns out. So second generation here, but also led youth groups before he did that. And my mum was involved in it. So I guess I grew up around youth ministry and in youth ministry from being kind of, a couple of weeks old, right through kind of growing up. So to the point that when I was in my teens, I was sort of involved in leading worship at stuff, involved at kind of getting alongside things. So kind of gave me loads of different opportunities, and my dad did his best at putting me off youth ministry. So don't panic. Like, this isn't just he was like indoctrinated me into youth ministry. Far from it. In fact, he fought it, but God had other plans. And so I grew up in a church where we had lots of different kind of groups, loads of different kids groups, so loads of kids and young people. And so I guess in many ways, kind of the opportunities, therefore, to serve in different ways came up. And one of the sort of things that they used to do was the youth group would lead kids groups. And I, at that age, decided that I didn't like kids very much. I kind of loved the youth group I was in, and I was in younger youth. So I was in that kind of 11 to sort of 14 age group. And we used to have an overlap year that was like year 10 before we went up into the older group.
Okay.
And for that year 10 year, I decided I wasn't going to overlap. I was just going to go cold turkey, finish younger, go older, because my brother's a year younger than me. And I was like, I can let Tim get through year 9, and he's just going to go older because he's not going to hang around here. He's not enjoying this. So the sooner he can get out of there. And I was like, when I'm in year 11, I can start leading a youth group and I can get involved in the younger youth. So, and that was really where my heart was at that point in time, and what I wanted to do, and where I felt very much called to. And so, and as I said before, I led sort of sung worship and music in church. So I guess the two sort of weave together sort of really well. And then, so got involved voluntary basis when I was sort of in my mid-teens. And then without a minor diversion in sort of my university years where I trained to be a primary school teacher. It's a really weird diversion when you love youth ministry and really feel called to it. But yeah, there's a much longer story to that. But ended up back in doing voluntary youth work in a church, sort of post uni, and then found myself in full-time youth ministry. So having sacked in teaching after 18 months and going, I don't like this. This isn't what I'm called to. So yeah, that's kind of very potted history. But yeah.
Good. Thank you. And Ben, tell us a little bit more about what your current role entails. How does it serve young people, churches in your area?
So youth advisor. These are the roles that used to get called, and probably still do in some places, youth officers. Ultimately, the role is about supporting churches in their youth ministry. So for me, you might find in other places, if you're listening to this across the country, you might find that there's a children and youth advisor, a children, youth and families advisor, who sort of deals with sort of like birth to probably somewhere mid-20s, because that tends to be where that gets pitched. But my remit's like 11 to sort of 20, early 20s, so that kind of student-y age. But supporting churches and how they do that ministry. So some of that looks like we run a youth event each year called Abide, which we run for 11 to 17-year-olds. Youth groups turn up. We use a kind of festival model, which is kind of you come with your group, like God does stuff in this place because we're making space for that, and it goes back into the local church. We run a conference each year in October called the Youth Leader Conference. Might as well say what it says does one on tin. So that takes place October every year, and then as well as training for someone's bespoke training across the year for specific needs, but also sort of if a church says, hey, come and work with our team, we'll journey with them for a bunch of time. So I guess in a nutshell, the aim is to equip, encourage, inspire, build confidence in sort of for leaders, so that they might see young people encountering Jesus and growing with him. And the hope is that whatever I do grows local church youth ministry. It's not about sort of growing a Diocesan youth group or something like that. It's about how ultimately do we see young people encountering Jesus in the local church and growing deep roots of faith with him. And so alongside that, we do a little bit of resourcing. So we have a podcast of our own. Thought I'd just throw this in. I did say to Becky, I'm going to spot this in occasionally. But Youthwork State of Mind podcast. You can sort of find that on all the places you're probably listening to this. So you can check that out. But we do kind of different resources through the calendar year as well. So we have something that's called Pick and Mix, which is sort of all the different elements you might want for a youth group. And so it's adaptable. Literally, you pick and mix the bits you want, but it's around different points of time through the year. So there's some for like Ascension, Easter, Christmas, sort of new sitting exams, or sort of New Year, things like that. So there's loads of resources out there. So and there a lot of them, or all of them on the youth side, are free to download. So hopefully that's helpful. And we've got a little bit of and I guess sitting alongside all that support and all of the resourcing is generally trying to kind of grow a youth work community in this area. So across Lancashire, I get to partner with some incredible people. One of which, as it was on this, when we're recording this, their pod released like yesterday, their episode released yesterday. So like Dan Randall, there's a few other people like Rachel Gardner's in our neck of the woods, Ali DeMay, Rob Stewart from Scripture Union. And we partner together to run something called The Gathering, which seeks to gather sort of youth workers together and just spend time sowing into youth workers, so that when we step away from the ministry we're doing, that God might minister to us, and just building a bit of a community around. So we want to see, as I said before, see young people meeting Jesus and see them growing with him. So yeah, that's kind of in a really large nutshell, roughly what I do. Yeah.
I think that pretty much covered everything.
Yeah, pretty well. Sorry, that was quite a big, long list, but
no, it's good. It's good. It's good to hear about all the different bits. How has God led, moved, or changed you along the way, along your youth work journey?
Well, starting at when I was about 15, I'd like to think I've been looking back on this quite a lot recently. I won't tell you how old I am, but there's a significant birthday next year, and it kind of gets you pondering.
Yeah, same for me.
Yeah, I have a feeling yours is probably a decade behind mine, though. So, I have a feeling you might be more youthful than I am. She's a bit worried. But yeah, you ponder quite a lot, don't you? As you hit these big birthdays, and you kind of go, what's happened? So yeah, being 15 and starting out, I guess in some ways I was just very full of enthusiasm and just took a lot of things. I guess, yeah, it was very much like, I've got this. Like I'm kind of confident. I know what I'm doing. And I think some of that rubbed off as I started in a sort of full-time employed youth ministry, stepping into that sort of chaplaincy role in a school. I was like, I've got this, no hassles, like I can do this worker thing. And I don't think it was necessarily that I was necessarily kind of to give it like a negative label. I don't think it was over arrogance. I think it was just a boldness of going, why not? I'm young. Let's go. Let's do this.
Yeah.
And I guess the other thing I kind of realized, and I guess I kind of really embraced the worker aspect of this, and of kind of ministry, and going, well, I'm a worker. Like I do stuff. And I think the big kind of journey I've been on over, well, nearly 25 years, which gives away what next year is, but is actually that that God is got a calling, that I'm in what I'm doing by his grace, not by my own ability. And that kind of realization that I need to be planted in him, first and foremost. And not that I wasn't doing that, but I think sometimes you can dive in and go, I'm all in, I've got this. And you lose track of the fact that actually you've got to be, what you're doing comes from the fact that God is your connection with God is where that's coming from.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that sort of fits around that is I've mentioned the kind of worker thing. I think the reality is I tend to refer to people as youth leaders more often than youth workers, because I think the worker thing, the worker title suggests we just do loads of stuff. And I think that realization that I'm called to lead people, that I'm called to lead young people, but other leaders in the role that I'm in, actually that comes with a real sense of, quite often sort of realize it's like that imposter syndrome a little bit in the background, but actually that realization of there's a responsibility here. And I know it's not fully my responsibility, but actually that, like, I'm going to approach this humbly, and I've got to approach this with God completely as the focus in this. And therefore, how does that shape? And what does that sort of, I've not got this completely down. I guess I probably spend a lot of the time thinking, I'm a broken person. I'm trying really hard to live like Jesus, not, oh, I've got this.
Yeah.
and I'm all over it. And I'll turn to God when I need him. It's absolutely like, this is not out of my strength. I think that's probably the probably most significant journey that I've done during all of this, over the last 25 years, which feels really weird to say that. That's quite creepy. That feels far longer than it should. But yeah, so that's probably the big thing that God's been doing in me.
Yeah.
Trying to keep that quite nice and concise, but yeah.
Yeah, no, lovely answer. Thank you. This might be quite similar, but what's the biggest lesson you've learned from youth kids work?
Well, I guess it links, but I'm not responsible for young people's faith. So that kind of idea that I think sometimes we can really own as youth leaders, youth workers, whatever title you're kind of holding, but you take on that responsibility going, oh man, I lead this stuff, and therefore, yeah, I'm suddenly responsible. And I guess sometimes we can feel that potentially that weight of responsibility from parents. I'll talk about them a little bit in a moment, but actually we're not. We're probably just a very blessed to be influential voice within young people's lives. But we get like an hour, 2, maybe if we're lucky 5, depending on what youth ministry we're running.
Yeah.
And therefore there's so much else going on. But therefore is that to think, actually, how am I intentional about the time I've got, and how does that point to Jesus? How do we create that space? And not that that's probably like where loads of people find themselves not being, but sometimes we can go, how do we make this engaging? How do we make this fun? How do we make this like all these other things that we want it to be? But actually, how do we keep the main thing the main thing? And I think like I probably grew up with a brain space that when if I've got a good idea, I can get Jesus in somewhere. Whereas now I'm like, okay, I want people to meet Jesus. How do we do that? And I think that's probably the massive lesson I've learned in the midst of it. And I mentioned parents before. I think starting out, you probably quite often think, oh, okay, parents, they're good for a lift. But in reality, they're so key. And how we might resource them to have the conversations of faith with their children, whether because we don't know where their faith's at some of the time. But how do we resource them? But equally, how do we get them on side, and how do we keep them on side? How do we communicate really well with them so they have a picture of us and what we're up to and what their children are in sort of engaging with? And if we can, how do we love those parents as well? Because I think parenting, become a parent, because to make it right at the beginning, about 7 years ago, I've realized that it really is good at highlighting your frailties as a human being, and where you actually kind of lack a little bit. And therefore, I think there's a lot of parents, particularly in sort of, the generation of parents now, just feel a little lost in it. We all go, oh man, I've got an adult today. This is tiring. And so therefore, how can we love our parents? Because in reality, they haven't been teenagers. They didn't grow up with the internet. They didn't grow up with social media. They're trying to raise kids in an era and an age where things are moving so fast.
Yep.
And we've got to have a lot of grace for those parents, but how can we resource them? How can we love them? How do we encourage them? And I think if we can do that well, we keep them on side and we keep them kind of, connected with what we're doing, which helps, hopefully is a partnership, not just you're doing this and we're doing that, and we'll muddle through this. So I think they're probably not some of the lessons I've learned along the way.
Yeah, good ones. Yeah. What are some of the biggest struggles you faced as a youth leader, and how have you overcome some of those things?
Biggest struggles.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest ones is not being a priority of the church leader. That's probably one of them. That can be really hard. Reality is, how did I overcome it? I stuck my head down and cracked on with it. I probably could have dealt with that a little differently, but I was younger, a little less experienced, and probably just thought, I just get it. It just needs to happen, and how we do that. And I think looking back on that, the reason I probably found that really hard work is also that like it naturally pushed us into a silo of kind of youth ministries over here, and that happens over there. And I'm really keen that, and I'm big on church's vision and youth ministry vision is one, and they align with each other. If the ministries go different directions, then actually all you're heading young people for is disappointment when they hit adult church. When they go, I'm going to find a church, whatever age it is that they decide that they've left youth ministry, they've left the work that's kind of aimed at them, and then they try finding a church. If we've gone off and set a completely different sort of expectation of what that looks like, ultimately will lead them to not being part of a church community, being part of a kind of community of faith that are going after Jesus, and therefore they end up a bit isolated. And we know that quite often leads people to not being sort of not kind of growing and sort of getting a bit stagnant in their faith and potentially just sort of dropping away. And I think that's one of the biggest things we can do. And so I guess in time, I've kind of gone, actually, if I was starting over again, and I was in a church role, one of the biggest things I'd be like, what's your vision? What's the expectation here? Even an interview, go, what's the expectation? How do I do this? How do I make sure that I'm not sort of against what you're doing, but how do I help you make this a priority so that it's budgeted well, it's that it's going the same direction as the church, but actually that the church go, we want to talk about this and invest in this ministry, that young people are vital and important to what we do, and And I think some of that comes from having done this role and having seen so many places where you turn up and they're going, can you come and persuade our church leader that this is important or that we should be doing this? And quite often busy church leaders go, great, we've got someone really capable to do that. And they will just divert it, but actually say, is this turning up? Is this from an Anglican perspective? Is this is this on the PCC agenda every month? Do you talk about children and youth ministry? Or, you know, actually that we have conversations, that we meet regularly and talk about it, even as a volunteer, even as a sort of whatever kind of capacity is, how do we get that up on the agenda? So that's probably one of the big struggles I've had along the way. I guess the hardest moment, if we're sort of thinking individual moment somewhere along the line, was a young person passing away. That was really tough. The bigger picture of that was that he'd had some health issues, but and had been rushed in the hospital. We had a weekend away, and this is why it kind of becomes a little harder. As we'd had a weekend away and he wasn't able to come, and so we'd spent the weekend like fervently praying for him the whole weekend. And Monday morning we got the news that he passed away, and when your youth group have invested in going, we're going to pray for his healing. We're going to pray that he gets better.
So hard.
Yeah, really hard. Trying to comfort young people through your own tears is quite hard as a thing, that as a sort of situation. And I think that's always, it's always tricky. But I think, I mean, overcoming that is sitting there with them and just sitting with them in it and sort of embracing lament and sort of grief as a group, but holding on to the fact that God is good in the midst of it, and that he knew where he was going. And I think that's sometimes one of those kind of really quite poignant moments in youth ministry. It's been, and I say that, it's a real pleasure, not a pleasure, that's the wrong word, like it's a privilege to walk through that with young people, because you don't always get to do that. Sometimes youth ministry can look a lot of fun, or it feels like, or it's like it's hard graft. But when you get to see young people and sit with them in the midst of tough situations, actually that's the points where probably relationships deepen and you have the conversations that actually open them up to faith and who Jesus is and is with them in the moment. So yeah.
Thank you. We're at the point of the interview where you get to ask me a question or two. So far away.
Fabulous. All right. If youth ministry, this is the weird one. If youth, and we this is a question we ask guests on Youthwork State of Mind podcast.
Yep.
And if you want to get a flavour of that, you can go to our Instagram account, have a little look. There's some clips in it. But the question we ask is, if youth ministry was and that's the question, that's the kind of the feature, but if youth ministry was a plate of biscuits, what would be on the plate, Becky? What would be on the plate? And you have to give some reasons why. This isn't just like ginger nuts, you like rich teas.
I don't know. If youth ministry was a plate of biscuits, there'd definitely be a variation of biscuits on that plate. It's not going to be all the same. My favourite biscuit at the minute is a Fox's chocolate cookie that is like covered with chocolate on one side. Those are decent biscuits that I would probably put on the plate. There'd be one of them.
Okay.
Going for quality, because you only get about 6 of those biscuits in the pack. So yeah, that'd be on there. I don't know the other kinds of biscuits. There's probably going to be a chocolate hobnob on there. There's probably got to be some. What
would be your reason for that? And I'll give you an example. So, being a bit tongue in cheek and very cheeky with this.
Yeah.
There's always a ginger nut on the plate because every youth group has a kid with ginger hair. So, why a hobnob?
Hobnob. I went for hobnob because I think they're quite a popular youth biscuit. That'd be something that I would have bought for a youth group. I don't know what else would be on there. There would definitely be a big mix of biscuits, because I think you've always got to have loads of different ideas in your back pocket as a youth worker to try and engage young people. And I kind of feel like as a youth worker, you need to sort of play lots of different roles as well, which kind of ties into the biscuit thing. Um, Taxi driver, pastoral care.
So you'd have a taxi biscuit there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. No,
Um,
it's a good. It's just a question I like to throw out.
yes, it
I
is
should
a
have
good
probably given you
question.
more warning. I do apologise, but
Oh no, it's okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I can go for spontaneous. I don't like spontaneous, but I can do it.
I feel like spontaneity is just part of the youth work world, isn't it? It's like,
Yeah.
I don't like it, but I have to do it regularly. So
Yeah. Did that answer it well enough?
I'm happy. I'm happy.
Yeah,
It's
good.
your pod, mate. If you're happy, I'm
Yeah.
happy. So
Yeah.
and I guess I guess this leans in a little bit into the last question you might ask me. And this is me cheekily hat tipping in something. But what would be your top tip for a new youth worker, or top tips for a new youth worker?
Not sure. I think I've probably got two. One I say all the time, which is the thing I always try and remind myself, which is all we have to do is like do our part, which ties into something that you were saying earlier about actually realizing that there's a bigger picture, and we just see young people for a small fraction of their lives and their work and their week, and actually we just play a small part in that. And I think for me, it's like remembering that it's God who does the work. You know, we do our small part, but it's God who makes the magic happen and makes it into something amazing. And I think that keeps you humble as well, knowing that actually it's not all you. You know, you don't have to be something or perform or you know, it kind of keeps you humble and keeps you focused on, just turning up and playing your small part and being obedient and asking God what it is that he wants you to do. And recognizing that actually, yeah, you're a small part of the bigger picture. And I think secondly, it would be like an encouragement to say that, when you feel like you're not good enough, like God is the one who picks people who don't think they're good enough. Like God doesn't pick people who are perfect, who are the obvious choice. For any of the people that he picked in the Bible for tasks, they were people who other people would have thought, what? Like, why is God choosing him? Kind of thing. Um, like he doesn't pick the most qualified, he qualifies the called. And I think sometimes as youth workers, we can feel like, who am I? I don't have the skills, or I don't have the time, or I don't have, I'm an introvert and I need to be extrovert, or I'm not the kind of person who can build a team. And, we put ourselves down and we make excuses for why we can't do something. And I think those are exactly the kind of people that God wants to use, people who don't think they can do it all themselves, people who need to rely on him for things. And yeah, those are the kinds of people that God does extraordinary things through. So if you think you're not good enough, great. You're the kind of person who God wants to use. Yeah.
Great top tips. Thank you for that.
Yeah. You're
Thought
welcome.
I'd go silly and sort of serious as well.
Yeah, no, they were good. They were good questions. No, they were good. What area of youth or kids ministry are you most passionate about, and why?
Most passionate about, I think, leaders being disciples first. And that's something that I've become kind of, increasingly that becomes kind of the most passionate thing I'm about is leaders being disciples first, but also like leaders being looked after. I guess the role that I do is leaders being looked after, because actually, them being connected to Jesus, them being disciples of Jesus, means that young people are going to encounter Jesus and become disciples. And I guess if you're asking me what am I most passionate about with kind of if I'm as a youth leader, as someone who's doing youth ministry with young people, is that young people that we view young people as, and we view our ministry as going, when we send them out to something, when they go on to whatever next, that we're excited about how God's going to show up, that we trust that God's in the midst of their life, and that when they show up wherever they are, that he's going to use them to transform that place that they show up, whether that's a workplace, whether that's university, whether that's a new college, if that's starting a family, if whatever that looks like, that actually that they've got deep roots of faith, and that therefore that spurs us on to go, how do we create opportunities? How do we make sure that young people are meeting Jesus? I say make sure, like that's quite hard, but like make sure that we create the space so that young people can encounter Jesus. So those are my biggies. So
good, great stuff. And Ben, how can people get involved in what you do?
How can people get involved?
I guess the podcast is the most.
Oh, you say that. Yes, you can listen to that. But you can follow us. So we have an Instagram account. Which kind of links similar name, or same name as Youthwork State of Mind. Give us a follow on Instagram. Here, see what we're doing. At the moment, we are in the midst of a series on top tips from youth leaders. So you might have seen what I did there. Getting Becky's top tips very quickly. But yeah, so Youthwork State of Mind, and I guess we're trying to create a bit of a online youthwork community as well. So if people want to sort of see what we're up to and sort of follow what we're up to and get involved a bit, that's a really good place to start. If you're in our neck of the woods, possibly a little harder if you're sort of Milton Keynes, Oxfordshire way, but that I know that they're not. I know Milton Keynes is in Oxfordshire, just in case people question my geography. I want to clear that up just before anyone gets there. But we have a youth, as I said before, our youth leader conference is in October. So you'd find all that information on Youthwork State of Mind. But equally, that's a great space. We seek to make that really accessible. It's a free conference. So if you want to pay for accommodation and travel up from Oxfordshire, from Milton Keynes, which I know is in another part of the country than Oxfordshire, anywhere, then you'd be very welcome. But it's a free day, and so people can do that. And equally, if you're in our area and you've got young people, then Abide is sort of there as I guess is the key kind of big things that we do. So a youth leader conference, space online, and our youth event, so people can come along to that, bring your young people, get involved. And if you don't have young people, come and join our team for that, and get involved and serve young people a different way. So,
great. And last question, what advice or encouragement would you give for the people listening? Many of them obviously youth and kids leaders, but some of them not necessarily.
Biggest things, biggest advice and encouragement, get to know Jesus really well, get to know him, love him, love young people, love it when the two meet, and I guess just keep doing what you're doing. The bottom line is, when we show up for young people, when we show up for kids, when we show up serving adults, like, reality is that the consistency and the safety that we can provide, backed up with the fact that Jesus is amazing and will transform their lives, actually is something that quite often doesn't happen. We keep seeing different aspects of sort of society support just dropping away. It's not there, it's not consistent, it's not safe. And I guess particularly for young people, for our children at the moment, what we're seeing is an uncertain world. And if we can offer consistency and safety within the midst of that, then that's gonna speak volumes about who Jesus is. It's going to speak volumes about who the church is, particularly in a time when safeguarding and the failings of safeguarding have been so in the press, so kind of across the Christian media, but also across kind of the more public sort of wider media. But actually, that the church is a place that loves people, that it cares for people, that it wants to keep children, young people, vulnerable adults, everyone safe. And that when you're in the midst of that, actually that's life transforming, because Jesus is in the midst of it. So yeah, keep doing that. Keep doing it, and even if it means it looks like maybe doing a little less, so that we can do it really well. Don't be scared to go. We need to do less to do more. There's something really important in that. And I guess my last little bit, which all feels like it weaves together, is small is beautiful. Small is beautiful. So if you've got a small kids group, a small youth ministry, like that's really valuable. That's incredible in terms of kind of a kingdom sort of place in the kingdom. Like that's as valuable as like a 200 strong youth group on a Friday night, whatever that, or kind of drop in ministry. It's where because when it's small, you get to know young people, you get to go deep with them. But it's also where you grow culture. It's where you grow values and vision, and that will set you up. So when you've got 50 young people, you know what you're about, and you know what people are, they know what they're coming to, and they know what it's about, and they know that it's about Jesus. So yeah, those. Hopefully that makes sense. I just sort of feel like I've burbled around. But yeah,
totally. I think every youth group has to start somewhere as well, doesn't it? I think sometimes. I know I've spoken to youth leaders who've got like 1, 2, handful of young people, and they're like, well, we've only got this many. And it's like refocusing to actually that those few are just as important. And actually, you just need to keep doing what you're doing. And yeah.
Absolutely. And let's be honest, if suddenly 40 young people turned up at your youth group one week, that's petrifying. So actually, why not see it build? Like do the things that you want to do. Get it rooted in the fact that they're going to meet Jesus. Do all that stuff that sets the ball rolling. So yeah, absolutely. And it's not just 5 young people. You've got 5 young people who turn up because they want to know you and they want to know Jesus, and what you're doing is right. So yeah, do not panic. Numbers are not a big thing. Numbers are not a problem. It's the movement that you see within it and in the lives of young people that's important. So
yeah, I totally agree. Cool. Thank you, Ben. Amazing. It's been lovely to have you today.
Pleasure. Thank you for dealing with my boxy background.
Yeah, thanks for joining us from the broom cupboard.
Yeah. From the broom cupboard. It's the storage unit at Diocesan office here in Blackburn. I feel a little, I have to confess, I said this right at the beginning, for those of you listening, Becky's background, if you're not watching this, is stunning compared to my wonderful grey and boxy background that she's looking at. It's amazing. So if you get a chance to watch this on YouTube, go and check out Becky's background. That's the key bit to all of this.
Yeah, you definitely need to find this on YouTube. You can find it on Youthwork Plus YouTube channel. All of our podcasts are also in video version there. If you haven't seen them or watched them before, definitely find this one, because the contrast between backgrounds right now is hilarious.
Yeah, I feel a little like I didn't think this through quite so much. I'm gonna go home and like classify, and by that I mean increase the class of the background in my house, just so that I can do these and feel like I've got something to offer. But
no, we're going for quality of audio and questions today, not backgrounds. It's not a competition.
That's very gracious of you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for joining us today, Ben, and for answering all of our questions, and giving us a little snapshot into your ministry and your journey. And it's been great to hear some of your answers and perspective on stuff. I hope that those of you listening have kind of tapped into something, and something you've heard has resonated with you today. But yeah, we hope you've been encouraged by listening to podcasts today. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because it helps you find us again and helps other people find this. And if you haven't listened to Ben's podcast, I'll give that another shout out before we finish.
Thank you very much.
Youthwork State of Mind. I mean, you may as well listen to as many Youthwork podcasts as you can
as well.
Because I mean, you're only going to get built up by listening to both of ours, so it's not a competition, Get them all queued up on the listen queue to listen to later. And if you haven't checked out either of our websites, then go and find out how we can perhaps help support you and cheer you on as youth and kids leaders, because I think that's what both of us are trying to do essentially.
Absolutely.
So we really want you to keep on doing what you're doing, stay in post, and be encouraged for the role that you do with kids and youth. And sometimes it's hard, especially these times of year where they feel quite busy. Sometimes we feel like, oh man, like if only I didn't help with the youth group, or if only I wasn't on the rota for this, because it's just an extra thing to do. But be encouraged and know that your obedience is going to lead somewhere good, even if you're not seeing the fruit of it now in your life or in the young people's lives that you're working with. But keep on doing what you're doing. And we'll see you on another podcast soon. Thanks, Ben. It's been great.
Been good. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.